if I could get everybody's attention to come up here, and we're going to go ahead and get the meeting started.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. At this time, I'll call the Indian River Lagoon Council meeting of February 7th to order. And as we rise for the pledge, I wanted to turn the gavel over to Commissioner Sebastian for a few words and a moment of silence.
Thank you. I'd like us to please take a moment of silence for Florida Highway Patrol Trooper Joe Bullock, who was killed on duty this week.
Thank you. So we'll all rise for a moment of silent reflection and then the pledge. And if you'll join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you guys for being here. It's always a pleasure. Before we go around with self-introductions, I wanted to recognize that we have 2 new appointments to the IRL Council for 2020. We have Councilwoman Billy Wheeler for Volusia County, replacing Deb Denny's. And we have Commissioner Kurt Smith replacing Commissioner Brian Lober from Brevard County. Welcome. Staff will be preparing appropriate recognition for our past board members for our May 6th board meeting. I would also like to recognize that Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch, governing board member from the South Florida Water Management District, is here. It's good to see you.
Good to be here.
I know the entire council appreciates the massive amount of work you're doing to advance Everglades restoration as a new governing board member, and welcome back.
Thank you.
Libby Pigman did an excellent job representing you, but we are happy to have you with us. And at this time, I just ask the rest of the board to introduce themselves. We'll start at the end.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Zadowski, San Lucie County Commissioner for District 1, and an NEP member from a long time ago.
Good morning. I'm Aaron Watkins, Director of DEP Central District in Orlando.
Good morning. I'm Stacy Hetherington, Martin County Commissioner, District 2.
And I'm Susan Adams, Indian River County Commissioner, District 1.
Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch, South Florida Water Management District Board, and my hometown is the town of Sewells Point.
Hi, Doug Pornique, Indian River Citrus League and St. John's Governing Board member. Thank you.
Billy Wheeler, Volusia County Council, District 2.
Kurt Smith, Brevard County Commissioner, and one of the original board members from way back when.
Welcome back, Kurt.
The old guard.
It's like old home week up there. And staff, can you guys introduce yourselves?
Go ahead.
I'm Daniel Claudy. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the IRL Council and the IRL NEP.
Carolyn Ansay, Legal Counsel.
Dwayne DeFries, Executive Director.
Kathy Hill, Deputy Director.
Aileen Wheeler, Special Project Coordinator.
Thank you. And I understand that Natalie Ellington and Jennifer DeMaio from the Region 4 EPA are listening in on the live stream TV. So we want to thank you for your continued support and our strong partnership. And with that, we'll move on to agenda revisions. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There are no resolutions or recognition letters and awards, but I just want to remind board members that you can make recommendations to staff if you want to include something under there on the agenda. The next item is going to be public comment. Anybody from the public is welcome to come up and speak on any item. We just want to make sure you fill out a public speaker card and give them to either Kathy or Kayleen to present to the board. So anybody from the public wishing to speak? Is this Mr. Commissioner Campo?
Yes,
Welcome, I'm sorry.
It's
Yes,
okay.
you're speaking on item 10.
I didn't know the protocol. My name is James Campo. I'm a commissioner with the town of Sewell's Point. I had the pleasure of working with Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch on the Sewell's Point Commission, and I had the pleasure of being mayor the year after she left. So it's great to see you again. Saw your mom last night at our septic to sewer education meeting. She was asking pointed questions and very good questions. And of course, I know Stacy with our work with the Republican Party, and I think I work with Doug on the Regional Planning Council. Town of Sewell's Point has taken a turn to build upon some of the successes of Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch. As you know, she helped initiate the fertilizer ban that ended up being a much bigger effort than just Sewell's Point. So we want to build upon that, and we want to be a leader in helping the Indian River Lagoon. We have a project before you. It's 10B. I've got my our grant writer and engineer here to discuss any details that you might need. It's an aggressive project. Our commission has taken a turn to put money where our mouth is to show a good example. We're an affluent community. We've been given a lot. We want to contribute a lot. The value of the project is in excess of 1 year's operating budget. So we're really trying to accomplish a lot. The project has morphed and gotten bigger. We need to communicate more and keep the staff included. We're looking forward to doing that. And if you have any questions under 10B, the technical folks are here to back me up. So thank you very much for all you do for our communities.
Thank you. We appreciate the comment. Anybody else from the public? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to water quality reports. The first one is going to be the Central and Northern Lagoon. Dr. Jacoby, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. And I'm going to cover the conditions sort of on the Indian River County border north, as it were. So, and I'm going to focus on a brief update from December and January. So if you can go to the next slide. Oh, I can do it. There we go. And what I'm going to use today are data that come from 5 of the 6 of what we call our continuous monitoring devices. So this is equipment that sits in the water column at about a half meter below the surface and measures a variety of different parameters about every 15 minutes, transmits those data via cellular telephone links, as it were, and the data show up actually available online after a short pause to get it organized. But those are the data that I'll use today. So first of all, temperature. Okay, yep, we lost the background, so some of this may be a bit tough to read, but temperature was sort of ticking over at about 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Celsius, and it dropped. So you can see the first major cold front lead to that drop of temperature, and in places went down to about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But temperatures are coming up because the cold has not persisted. I guess one of the other things you'll see throughout all of this is that the lagoon, so those sensors run from Mosquito Lagoon down to around Vero Beach, and you'll see that things are fairly consistent. We haven't had big problem areas or large patches where issues are of concern. Second thing I want to show you is the salinities. So you get this typical salinity gradient. So the closer you are to the southern end, the sort of Vero end, and places where there are inlets. Mosquito Lagoon stays relatively high because it's a kind of a place where evaporation takes over. So salinity rises as the water evaporates. But the red arrow there shows you a drop in salinity. That other sort of spiky drop, these are not data that have been quality controlled and quality assured. These are the preliminary data. And so with these sensors, you sometimes get those kinds of things. And we go through and we weed out those data that are outliers, as it were. But the red arrow shows you a place where we see a story, and when you add the next rad, the radar rainfall for that Vero area, you can see that the salinity drop coincided with 2 pretty reasonable rainfall periods. So that's what drives that salinity. The next set of data kind of go to a little story about something I haven't spoken about here very often, but that's pH. So we'll walk through, and I'll try to set the stage for something that we did in the STEM Advisory Committee, which was have a speaker come and talk to us about coastal acidification, which is an issue. So you can see here, first of all, this is dissolved oxygen concentrations, and they're all been good at all of the stations. They're all above 4 milligrams per liter. 2 milligrams per liter is where things start to get stressed. So, we weren't seeing any of the dips that might lead to fish kills or other problems like that. So that's been good news. One of the reasons for that probably is the amount of phytoplankton, the single-celled algae that are in the water column that we had trouble in the past, the algal blooms. We haven't had much of that. So you can see here from the chlorophyll levels, these are, again, this is not a laboratory chlorophyll, but it's a consistent measure of chlorophyll. They've been relatively low, so we're not seeing the hundreds or the 80s or the 60s that we've seen in the past. The red arrow points to a spot where there was a relatively persistent rise to slightly above 20 to 30 micrograms per liter, and that's part of this story about how things operate with pH. So here's pH, and pH is a measure of how acidic or basic something is, in this case the seawater. So pH is a logarithmic scale. So each one of those units, if you go from 7 to 8, that's a 10 times change. If you go from 7 to 9, that's 100 times change, and so forth. So although the units are relatively small, the changes are relatively large. And so acidic would go from like battery acid to lemon juice and so forth, and basic goes from sort of milk up to drain cleaner. So if you've had any experience with battery acid or drain cleaner, you know that that's not conducive to most living organisms. So we want to be somewhere in the middle. Distilled water is at 7. Estuaries will run from about a little over 7 typically at the freshwater part to about 8 something in the seawater. And that's because of the way the chemistry works. So, but if here the red arrow shows you that the pH went up. And so the story is that the chlorophyll, the phytoplankton, produce oxygen when they photosynthesize. That drives up the oxygen concentrations, which we kind of saw the link there. But they also pull carbon dioxide out of the water column. And carbon dioxide in the water column forms a weak acid, and that drives pH down. So pHs below 7 are more acidic. And here you can see the rise, and that's because these phytoplankton were drawing out the carbon dioxide, and so pH goes up. And the take-home message for right now is that this local pH is driven by local phenomena like photosynthesis. And when I come up to talk about the STEM AC, I'll kind of give you the rest of the story there. So, okay. So the only thing I'll add is that the seagrass maps are nearing completion. That's maps taken from aerial photography done in spring of 2019. When I was last here, I think I told you that the summer transects had increased in length by about 8 meters average, which was good news. But what we're seeing with the mapping and what we're seeing with following up on the transects is that the cover, so when you look at the seagrass, it's very sparse. And a lot of that addition doesn't tend to make it over the threshold for becoming mapped. And so the acreage is not going to increase and probably, in fact, will decrease a bit. So that's where we stand with that. But they should be out shortly.
Are there any questions? No? Thank you, Dr. Jacoby. The next item is a water quality report on the Southern Lagoon. And let's see, we have Katie Bowles and Jose Vega. Welcome. Thank you.
Morning, folks. This data I'm about to present is an estimated total nitrogen and phosphorus load calculations for the C23 basin, the C24 basin, and 10 Mile Creek. The rainfall And flow data comes from the South Florida Water Management District DB Hydro database. The database used in the spreadsheet comes from the rainfall data used in this spreadsheet was from TMCWX located in the 10 Mile Creek. And the DB key used was AL744, which is reported in the daily average. For this time period reported, the flow monitoring stations are S48 South, C23 Basin, that's in the C23 Basin, S49 South for the C24 Basin, and the Gordy South for the 10 Mile Creek. The total nitrogen and total phosphorus concentrations are static, and they come directly from the DEP's WASH model. Rainfall in this quarter was, about 3 inches above average in the basins, and the total nitrogen was at about 130 tons, while total phosphorus was at 25 tons. So again, these numbers just are here to just reiterate how important those IRL South northern components are to the health of the Indian River Lagoon. That's all I got.
All right. Are there any questions? No? Thank you.
Normally here where I say the C23, C24, C25 reservoirs are so important for protecting our friends to the south.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Katie Bose. I'm environmental specialist for Martin County. I'll just be giving a quick update to piggyback on what Jose was saying. So one of the biggest things we want to pay attention to as far as the estuary health is what's going on with Lake Okeechobee. So if you look at the dark blue is where we're currently at. We're about in the middle of the base flow subband, and typically, the engineering chart for this time period, being at this level, they would send about 200 to 250 CFS to the St. Lucie estuary and about 400 to 450 to the Caloosahatchee. But the Corps is using a little bit of that operational flexibility and sending about all the 650 to the Caloosahatchee, which is good because they have been asking a lot for more freshwater inflows to support their seagrasses. This USGS station is in the mid-estuary by the Roosevelt Bridge. They also call it Speedy Point. This is looking at temperature and salinity over the last 30 days. The temperature stayed relatively constant. We've had a couple cold fronts come in, but we're hoping the salinity can, it's peaking around 15 to 20, and that'll be pretty conducive as we enter the oyster spawning season. Looking at Enterococcus, we've had mostly good results, a little blip here and there at Leighton Park. It's usually attributed to rain events, and hopefully we'll see that kind of get more toward the green in the spring, and we usually do have more trouble with that in the summer as well during the rainy season. So this is one of the biggest things that's been going on. Governor DeSantis, when he entered office, mandated that all the basin management action plans be updated within 1 year. So the St. Lucie River and Estuary BMAP is being updated and will be completed in the next couple weeks. So this graph here shows, based on the DEP's update, that we surpassed the 5-year milestone and are looking pretty good as we're entering our 10-year milestone since the BMAP was initiated. So this data is also taken from the Roosevelt Bridge as a monthly sampling effort. And where we are in the mid-estuary, there's a lot of influence, from tides, from local basin runoff, from Lake Okeechobee. So we are hoping to work more with DEP and the district on kind of ramping up sampling in this area so we can really make sure we're staying on track and getting the best data possible. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Any questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Jackie Thurlow-Lippish, and I'm new here. So I just wanted to introduce myself, and we've seen each other in passing. I don't know if you all saw it or the county saw it or how you could work it in, but just recently for the South Florida Water Management District, they added some slides during the environmental report, which were very wonderful for me to see. They did really an extensive seagrass study, and we haven't had that for a very long time.
Right.
And I'm sure they'd let you use that, and that's just, you know, kind of a fun, important thing to know. I'd like to have that shared, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other one was like almost like these little Pac-Men that were symbols to show the different types of phytoplankton, or you know, whether it was blue-green algae in the water, but again, some wonderful additions to that ecological report that are things that, you know, you can see, like the seagrass and the algae in the water, or not hopefully seeing the algae in the water. So if you don't find them, let me know, and I'll make sure they send them.
Okay,
to.
absolutely. I know they're working on updating their Recover in the next couple weeks or so, so that'll be a good thing to look at too.
Well, great.
So.
And I know your time is limited. I just think that those things are, you know, they're just warm and fuzzy. They're nice.
Absolutely.
They're, if you don't have the seagrass in the water, you don't have life.
Right.
So we want to know about that. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just a comment. We'll reach out to South Florida Water Management District. We've had a couple staff changes within our Science Advisory Committee, and we'll coordinate, and maybe we bring a member of South Florida up on the water quality and do a full team delivery, because those perspectives from the district and these local basins, you know, we're all looking at different levels of spatial and temporal scale. So we'll work on that for the next meeting. But I also wanted to add, I've got a number of fishing guides who are my lifeguards out there. And just for the general public who may be listening, just in the last 2 days, I'm getting more than a couple reports from those guides of large drift algal communities, the seaweeds, starting to pile up on shorelines and some of the shallow bars. And the report first was, you know, I'm seeing these white streaks. I think I'm looking at an algal bloom. And Captain Frank Catino, chair of our Citizen Advisory Committee, took some pictures. Those are actually bacterial breakdowns of that algae. Not, you know, it's a natural thing, but when it's large areas, you know, that can smell bad, hydrogen sulfide, low oxygen. So just wanted to let everybody know, we are seeing some beginning blooms. They're kind of flashy. We'll see the reports from St. John's to kind of corroborate that with the science. But my lifeguards out in the water are a little concerned right now because of the patchiness of what they're seeing. But we're aware of it, so if people are out there and they're concerned, they can always call us. But we're aware of what's going on out there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for staying on top of that. Any other questions? No?
Nope. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next item is going to be our consent agenda. We do have a couple items on here: approval of minutes, approval of the chair and co-chair for the advisory committees, and management conference appointments. And I understand, Dr. DeFries, are there any changes to the?
No changes, but for the record, I'd just like to let you know who the chairs were. Every year, we get to vote on chairs and vice chairs in each of our committees. There were no volunteers, and so there were no changes this year. And there's a fair amount of work, but for the record, Bob Yulovich and Kathy LaMartina will co-chair the management board. I know Kathy's here. Thank you very much. We really, and I think Bob's here too, aren't you? Yeah, thanks, Bob. There's a lot of work to this, and we use them almost as our connection to those committees. In the STEM Advisory Committee, Dr. Chuck Jacoby and Chad Truxell from Marine Discovery Center will chair. And in the Citizen Advisory Committee, Captain Frank Catino, who's also the mayor of Satellite Beach, and Jesse Wales from Marine Discovery will chair. So for the record, we are status quo in our chairs until people step up and want to volunteer.
Well, they've been doing a good job, so we're glad they're staying where they are. Does anybody want to pull any item for from consent? No? Seeing none, then we'll need a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll move on to the Management Conference Committee reports. First up is going to be the Management Board report. Welcome, Mr. Yulovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good seeing you, Jackie. Billy, welcome aboard. Okay. And of course, Kurt, welcome back. We met Tuesday, and I tell you, it was standing room only. There was a ton of people there, and nothing better than starting your day with a bagel, coffee, and a chemistry lesson. And I should have paid more attention to chemistry when I was in it for 3 years, you know, remembering about ions and electrons and all that stuff. So I want to thank you all for continuing to support our leadership and all the committees, in particular in regards to the management board. I've told you I am continually humbled and honored to serve as that chair. I am surrounded by, I just saw Sam Amerson, haven't seen Sam in a while, and I said, there's more doctors in that room than there is on Grey's Anatomy, you know, and I'm not one of them. I'm blessed to have Kathy as the chair and staff, and Dwayne always says, great job, Bob, and I said, it's not me, it's the staff and that, and Kathy brings a tremendous amount of experience, but one of the things that she brings to the table that's remarkable is keeping me in line, okay, and focused.
That is remarkable.
That is truly remarkable. The Finance Committee, in regards to your budget, the finance, in your document in front of you, your board, your agenda, the Finance Committee met and reviewed and moved forward to the Management Board recommendation for approval of the budget that will be posted in your document as 10F. We have a great dynamic Finance Committee, and they do a thorough job on reviewing it, so you can rest assured that this isn't a cursory review, this is a very detailed review. The meat of the meeting dealt with, of course, the ranking of the projects, and I cannot tell you, as a reviewer, sitting down and doing my share, it takes a couple days on my behalf, and then we unload that on this staff, and this staff is truly remarkable in what they do in such a short time. To have this in a presentational format to give us at a Tuesday meeting after they got it Friday is just, I cannot praise them enough in that regard, in all sincerity. In regards to the rankings, and this is always a matter of much discussion, the board, the management board, still maintains that the process, the integrative process, is paramount. That, and we continue to do motions to support that. So in regards to your package, I'm talking about the projects in green. We feel that there is a process that's been tweaked over the years, and that the integrity of that process is paramount to the success of the project and the program. And we are adamant in defense of that process. However, it doesn't mean that we're so myopically involved in that we don't look at opportunities in the future, which takes us into what you have in front of you, what we call the yellows. And we had quite a debate about the inclusion of the next ranking. So what you do is we look at the greens, and we approve those, and then you have your numerical, I'm hoping they all have this in their packet.
Yes, they should be in your package.
Okay.
And we're going to go through them step by step with you, just like we did our advisory
So
boards here in a minute.
What page are they? Where are they?
I'm looking at Kayleen to see.
Let me give you the overview, and then when you guys, when Dwayne takes you through the project by project. I'm just letting you understand that we give a lot of thought to this before this comes before you, okay? So we get into the yellows, we had quite a discussion about what to do when you have a little money left over. How can you best parlay that into a successful project? And what we did in this case is, through a motion from the board, was to move forward with moving money from reserve, and Dwayne's going to give you a lot more detail, into a project that we thought had a stronger proponent of human health, and that'll be, Dwayne will discuss that in regards under the Science and Innovative Panel rankings. We had 2 negative votes on that, and the votes weren't relative to the projects. The votes were relative to the distribution of reserves for something like that. And it got down to a budgetary thing. And I can recall in my experiences as the assistant budget director at South Florida Water Management District that there was always an issue about reserves. If your reserves are too much, then there's a sense from some of the officials that you've overtaxed. But you don't do a reserve in the sense that you lose all sense of reasonableness to protect for any rainy day event. In South Florida, the issue there was we were the largest at the time, largest consumer of diesel fuel. If there's a situation in the Far East that raises the prices, you have to be able to purchase that. So the discussion and the negative comments relative to our process wasn't so much about the project rankings, it was about the utilization of reserves. Daniel will tell you more about the potential to pick up some additional funds in audit. So when we come forward with a recommendation, we thoroughly look at everything both on top of the rug and underneath the rug to give you the best advice we can in regards to this. And please rest assured that that group is very dynamic in the way they address these matters. So that was the two big issues was the projects and then the budget that'll be for you in regards to your agenda. And unfortunately, I'm gonna have to leave, take care of some medical situations with my wife in the afternoon. So nothing serious. So if there's any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Yulovich regarding the budget?
And I didn't want to steal any thunder from Dwayne and Daniel and all that. I just wanted to set the stage for hopefully a very dynamic and energetic discussion about that. And then again, please remember how strong we feel about the integrity of the process, and hopefully you share that with us. Okay?
Just go home and take care of Barbara.
Will do, bud. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next item is going to be a report by the STEM Advisory Committee. Dr. Jacoby, welcome again.
Thank you. Chuck Jacoby, the recurring chair of your STEM Advisory Committee. I told them it's on your heads, so we'll see if we get volunteers next time. I'll start where Bob left off, as it were. And we too had a discussion about the ranking of the proposals. And I think we were the benefit of having followed their discussions. So we extracted what I would call the usable take-home messages and applied those. And the recommendations that came out of the STEM Advisory Committee were to proceed with those projects that were ranked high and fit within the allocated budget, or as we said, go for the greens, and then to try to authorize staff to go out and do their best to negotiate, find, steal, whatever it might take, funding to reach further into the list. Which would be, to come back with a proposal of how to fund the things in yellow. So that's where we left that. We also had a discussion of the process, and I think, as always, there will be suggested tweaks to how this works, because kind of each time you go through it, you go, oh yeah, that wasn't what I expected. Is there a way to, kind of make sure everybody understands what we were after? So I'm happy to talk some more about that if you'd like. But our key driver probably was helping staff get to the EPA work plan, because that's due in June. So May, the next meeting, presses that deadline pretty hard. So we want to make sure that they had a way to go forward without having to panic at the end point, as it were. The second thing we did was we heard about the various planning documents that are being developed. And a lot of them hold a fair amount of technical information, and so we'll be making sure that people are available to submit their comments and input to those documents, get the volunteers organized. The last thing I want to talk a bit more about, as I said when I came up to do the conditions report, is the guest speaker that we had, who was Dr. Kim Yates from the USGS in St. Pete. She's an oceanographer, a chemical oceanographer, and she came over to talk to us about coastal acidification. So one of the very first things she did was differentiate ocean acidification, which you may have seen in the newspapers. You don't tend to see coastal as much. From coastal acidification. Ocean acidification is driven primarily by global sort of factors. Both relate to the amount of CO2, carbon dioxide, that gets into the water, because that, as I mentioned before, CO2 forms a weak acid in seawater, and so the pH starts to drop. Coastal acidification is driven more by local things. So freshwater inputs tend to be a little more acidic because of the carbon they carry. But one of the main ones, and one of the ones that we're battling here, is what I'll call eutrophication, which is the increase in organic matter in a system. That's typically driven by an increase in nutrient delivery, and that's where you go to the total maximum daily load and the basin management action plan process is to try to drive that back and keep that from causing a problem in the system. So obviously, the lagoon is doing battle with that issue, and that's a key driver of coastal acidification, so inshore kind of acidification. In both cases, there are losers from acidification. So as pH drops, in particular shellfish, so oysters, clams, crabs, so forth, they pull calcium materials out of the water column, and that becomes much harder as the pH is lower, so they can't form their shells. This is particularly problematic for the larval forms, the small forms that don't have much wherewithal to hold on for very long. There are also maybe winners. So more carbon dioxide in the water can drive the growth of things like seagrasses, which is a good thing. Seagrasses use carbon dioxide to photosynthesize. That's where they get the carbon from to build their tissues. But it also drives algae. So you'll get more blooms of algae, some essentially like the drift algae that Dwayne mentioned a minute ago. But overall, the key is probably to understand where the system sits in this whole acidification spectrum. So for us, in a sense, the take-home message was, we may have a problem, we may be approaching a problem, or we may actually be solving a problem, but we may need some more data to understand how that works. And that was one of the key messages from Dr. Yates. So they have networks of places, and the NEPs, some of the NEPs are part of it, where they are trying to track this process. So they put out sensors that help them, and they take chemistry measurements from grab samples, water samples, to try and understand how their various systems are moving in this spectrum of acidification. And Dr. Yates is a member of the sort of federal level interagency working groups, and then the sort of regional southeastern working groups. And in both cases, he said that they were really keen to see something around the IRL come into that system, because there's stuff that goes along, say, the Gulf Coast and the west side of Florida, and then there's a fairly big gap till you get up further north. And so, they were looking to recruit, as it were, the Indian River Lagoon into this system of tracking this process. And there's help available, and she provided us with some background information that we'll go through to help us take a look at what might need to change or happen. But it's, as she pointed out, not necessarily something for the faint-hearted. The reason that my stories showed you the short-term drivers of how pH varies, but what we're looking at here is the long-term drivers. So the way you're going to understand where your system is and where it's headed is by taking data over a longer term. You won't be able to see it in the variation of the short term. You have to have longer-term data. So anyway, we'll be discussing that as we go along to make sure that we understand what we're looking at and see what we might want to do about it. We did, again, approve the budget as it was proposed, so that's it for me.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Dr. Jacoby? No? Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I want to take this opportunity. I was listening to Dr. Jacoby and thought, I need to show you as council board members where this is maybe all heading. It's an appropriate time. So, like our last meeting, Dr. Jacoby talked about mercury, and this was ocean acidification. In May, we're working, and I want to thank Chuck. He has worked really hard to get national experts in front of us to have this conversation where they may be new to the lagoon and may not. So in mercury, they actually had data. This information is all flowing towards our habitat restoration planning process, which is under contract and underway. So we will have a whole lagoon restoration kind of phase 1 plan by hopefully, the end of this calendar year, and a comprehensive analysis of every monitoring partner. We have 91 to 92 data collectors and users. we're bringing all of that together in another contract on the same timeline. So CCMP was passed by you in August. That's the big guidance. These two planning documents come into play as kind of special focus, and we're moving through this monitoring kind of series of scientific inquiries to guide those planning documents, but also to come back to you, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. In May, we need, as council, to look and say, what are we going to do in the fiscal year 21-22? And so if you remember last year, I think we did this in the July-August framework, that kind of, it was a meeting, but we workshopped. What are our priorities? Where do we want the money to go? What are the categories of RFPs? We were challenged and actually requested at the federal level that we see this gap. We think you should be looking at coastal acidification, specifically because nobody's looking at it on the East Coast, in Florida. That will be a decision we'll address in May, because that's a significant financial and organizational commitment that we won't be able to do from within our organization, but we'll be looking at both water management districts, DEP, have that discussion over the next 90 days to say, are we going to go there? And if we are, what might that look like in that commitment? And you all have already made that commitment in harmful algal bloom monitoring. And if you remember our atmospheric nitrogen sensor, and so stand ready. May is going to be kind of that next change. It's a phase change with the CCMP, where you will get, with our advisory boards, this long-range view of, are we where we want to be? Now we're moving into year 6 after 5. Are there some areas that we need to rethink for priority, both programmatic and financial? So that's how all this stuff is going to be weaving into you all by our May meeting.
Okay. I think that's something we do on a yearly basis to an extent, so it's always good to relook at our process.
That's correct, and we already have a list. We have never said no to a recommendation on the RFP process. They get better and better each time, and every time we do it, we'll see something that we had never seen before.
Right.
So we've already started to assemble those recommendations from this last session.
Awesome. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to add, thank you, Dr. Jacoby and Dwayne. Science outreach is so important, and what you gave us just now, a little primer of the science behind environmental systems, the decisions that are made based on that science is super important. It kind of takes me back to sitting in Dr. Windsor's class back in FIT, way back in the day, learning about this, and I really appreciate you kind of engaging and sharing that information with the stakeholders, everyone here and everyone listening, so they can understand things about the natural systems and how that's affected. So thank you so much.
Okay. Other comments? All right. We'll move on. Citizens Advisory Committee. Hello, Kathy.
Hi, good morning. I'm sitting in for Frank today. He had a client, I think. So the Citizens Advisory Committee met yesterday in this room, and they had a nice clean agenda, all new business, nothing from former meetings. They went over the budget and they went over the projects, so they also saw all of the projects. They also recommended moving forward with the green projects, the ones that are good to go, and agreed with the staff recommendation for the 2 that are in question in yellow. So that will be their recommendation to you on that. They recommended approval of the budget, and we also talked to them about some plans for social media in the future, kind of doing a theme per day for our social media, so we're going to be moving along with that. And that was it. It was pretty cut and dry meeting.
Awesome. Any questions for Kathy about Citizens Advisory? No? All right. Thank you. Okay, there is no old business, so we will move on to new business, and the first item is going to be election of officers. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn Ansay, our attorney, to handle that.
Thank you. Good morning. As you may recall, our interlocal agreement provides that in January of each year that you all select officers for the coming year. There are 3 officers that serve on behalf of the Board of Directors. We have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. This past year, in the position of chair, we had Councilwoman Deb Denny's from Volusia County. Vice chair, we had Commissioner Adams. And secretary, we had Commissioner Hetherington. And so with that, we don't have any dictated process as to how you adopt those officers, but over the course of the last 4 years, it's been really a process of discussion and then a motion by one of you. You can do it as a slate or you can do it in individual officers. We're really not bound to any formal process. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right. Questions?
Prepared to make a motion.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the slate as stated.
Second.
Are you doing that?
Yeah, just to clarify, in terms of the slate, the ones that I referenced were for the prior year.
Oh.
So if you want to just maybe clarify each position and name that you're nominating, that would probably be helpful. And just to add a little bit more context to it for those of you who haven't been at prior meetings where we've adopted officers or approved officers, the board has historically selected county representation to serve in the officer positions. Since our inception in 2015, it has always been a county representative that has served as a chair or vice chair. There is nothing legally that says that must be so. It's just a position that apparently the districts in DEP have stepped back and never really wanted to take those positions. But I'm just letting you know that that's how that's worked. And also, historically, you've rotated up, as many organizations do. So vice chair becoming chair, secretary stepping into the vice chair role, and then someone who's not serving in either of those 2 roles stepping in as the secretary role, and those have rotated so that the counties have kind of just really been in this rotation. So I don't know if that helps put a little bit more context on it.
And Madam Chair, I'll withdraw my motion, but the way I understood what you were saying is that we had gone in a rotation and that the rotation is what I was expecting as the slate is to move, and then we would have to name then a secretary as the last position. So the slate would be vice chair to chair, the secretary to vice chair, and then come back with another motion for the secretary. That was what I was understanding what you were saying.
Commissioner, that would, yes, and to do that, last year vice chair again was Commissioner Adams. Secretary, which if you followed that formula to move into vice chair, would be Commissioner Hetherington. And in terms of the county that was last seated, I think it would have been Brevard County. So it would be Commissioner Smith would, if we followed what has been done in the past, and again, there's no legal requirement. This is just history that I'm giving you, not legal advice, which lawyers probably shouldn't do, but I'm going to do it anyway. History would be that it would be Commissioner Smith would step in as secretary should you choose to follow that framework.
And that was my intention. So that's my motion.
That was the second's intention too.
Okay. So now that has been clarified, thank you. Is there any other nominations? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, I think. But I'm happy to have Commissioner Smith back, so that's good. Good to see you.
It's great to be back.
Yeah.
The next item is going to be, it's a cluster item actually, B through E, is our RFP proposal scores and funding recommendations. And I think Dr. DeFries is going to give us kind of a high-level review before we look at details and begin addressing a multiple series of motions.
Okay, I'll let you do it.
So you'll tie all the other stuff together for us here.
Yeah, so we're actually going to move you through almost the same discussion points that we did in each of these 3 advisory committee meetings. We're going to make some recommendations on process, but because we have new members, what I wanted to do is give you a high-level view of this first, and then we'll kind of walk through it, and then come back to board discussion of motions. And so we have three major issues that we're addressing today that are of really significant importance both to our future planning, but also our legal requirements under Florida statutes to have a tentative budget in place on or before March 1, and then also to position us for our EPA work plan. And then for some of your newer members, each year our federal dollars that come through the U.S. Treasury to the EPA, we have to put a proposal in for those dollars every year. That proposal is reviewed at EPA Region 4 Regional. Then it goes up to headquarters, and they'll come back and either certify. Usually they don't amend because my staff is really good at getting those proposals right. But we have a time certain of before June 1. And there's some reasons why this year it's probably an advantage to get those in early, and that's because of the additional dollars we received in the budget in December when Congress passed budget. So I'm going to just go through these bullets so you can see kind of how this works. So, we'll adopt today a tentative budget based on your decisions, and that tentative budget will be amended between now and May, and in May we will finalize that budget by resolution pursuant to Florida statutes. Today we're going to identify those EPA projects, and we'll go through the detail so we can submit that plan on or before the June 1 deadline. And I just want to remind you kind of how we looked at this financially over the last 5 years. We have always looked at your local contribution to the interlocal as the monies for shovel-ready turn dirt and programmatic administration. And we've separated those federal dollars to meet the obligations of Section 320 in the Clean Water Act that authorizes us. And so you'll see in the RFP, it's not arbitrary. So the science and innovation projects will be funded out of those federal EPA dollars. The other projects are coming out of our local contributions. As we move forward, you'll contemplate authorizing staff to go ahead and move contract negotiations. So all of the proposals that we look at today and those that you move forward for funding, staff will negotiate contracts, see if we can find a little money in some of those negotiations to bring back to you in May. Some years we do really well with that, and some years these proposals are super tight and we don't get as much back. And if we can put more money on the table for consideration before final budget, we'll bring more projects to head. And then you will see in the two yellow projects, which we'll show you in a minute, we're going to walk you through in detail, we have some projects that fell right on the line in two categories. Water quality, where there's partial funding, and over in the science and innovation, and we'll deal with those individually as we move forward. Next slide. So I'm going to bring Dan Kolodny, our Chief Operating Officer, up, but before I do that, I just want to brag on staff. Bob Yulovich mentioned it, but we didn't get those rankings until Friday, end of business, and on Tuesday we were bringing all of this to the management board and STEM, and I just want to thank my staff. That weekend was more than a full-on weekend, and Monday. But getting this early, many of you who have been here remember that normally we'd be doing this later, rushing to the EPA, not having this time to deliberate, but more importantly, not having this time between the tentative budget and final budget to see what we can do financially. So I'm going to recommend we continue to try to get these projects identified as early in the sequence, so we're not pushing up against our March 1 tentative budget timeline and also June 1. So Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I will stand aside on the detailed walkthrough, but all staff are available for questions as we go.
Fantastic.
Right.
Welcome.
Good morning. So we had 31 proposals over 4 categories in the RFPs. 11 proposals were in the water quality restoration with a total requested amount of $1.3 million. We had 3 proposals in habitat restoration with a total request of $242,000. 7 proposals in community-based restoration requesting $436,000, and 10 proposals in science innovation for $687,000. So as you can see, we had a lot more requests than we had available funds. I'd like to make a special thank you to all the reviewers. It was a heck of a job doing all those reviews of all those projects in such a short time frame. I know I put a lot of pressure on everybody to get them back to me on time, and I really, really appreciate that they were able to do that for the most part. There was 310 review sheets from all 40 reviewers, and that ended up being about 6,446 data points I had to go through. So we'll get to water quality here. So I'm going to go through these ones in green first. These were the ones that fell within the ranking available. Once we go through these, we'll come back to this, the 2 yellows that you'll see. So water quality, the top ranked proposal came from Kashi Church Foundation. This is a septic to sewer conversion project in Indian River County that will abandon the property's 12 septic tanks, run 3,000 linear feet of sewer line, install 10 manholes, and connect 16 mixed-use facilities to the gravity sewer system. Kashi Church is requesting $89,956 of IRL Council funds, and they have committed $211,681 as match. This project is estimated to remove 139 pounds of total nitrogen annually from entering the lagoon. The second ranked project is from Indian River County Department of Utility Services. This is also a septic to sewer project in the North Sebastian area that will connect up to 201 parcels, 90% of which are developed. Indian River County is requesting $204,017.69 of IRL Council funds, and they estimate a cost share match of $5,637,912.31. This project is estimated to remove 5,580 pounds of total nitrogen and 900 pounds of total phosphorus annually from entering the lagoon.
Can I ask a question real quick? Can you help explain the cost share match column? Is that what the entity's bringing, or is they still need to acquire that, or is that what they've already acquired in order to have the project occur?
For some of these projects, it's their cost share match and their partners. Most of them have that already. There are a couple that have estimated they have a grant in or some kind of request for matching funds. The requirement is that they have to have it by contract execution.
Okay, thank you.
The third project is from Martin County Utilities and Solid Waste Services. This is also a septic to sewer conversion project that connects 150 properties. Martin County is requesting $150,000 of our council funds, and they have committed $506,391 in match. The project estimated to remove 4,050 pounds of total nitrogen and 27 pounds of total phosphorus annually from entering the lagoon.
Yeah, you can ask a question.
Sorry. Hi, do you mind going back for a minute?
Sure.
I'm new to this, and I absolutely support churches. But can you just explain to me, like, what is the Kashi Church Foundation? And then when you look down the rest of that row, almost everything else is a town or a institution. Is it up for every entity?
So for every entity, this is the applicant.
Okay, so what is the Kashi Church Foundation?
They are a church foundation that's here locally in Indian River County. They actually submitted to us last year for a grant proposal, and they were ranked high enough for it. However, they weren't in that green section. They were kind of down in the below section. So they went ahead and redid their proposal, and it was ranked high enough this year.
So the proposals are open to churches, businesses, government. There are no limitations on who can apply.
No.
There is one limitation. I'm going to jump in. So businesses, we have had a number of private industries If they partner, they need to be either with a government entity, an NGO, and there are many different kinds of NGOs, but an industry would not be appropriate to our grant. So 501c3 nonprofits, we are open to, but not private industry.
And just to add or piggyback, the Kashi Church Foundation is a community that has multiple houses along the St. Sebastian River. And I believe they've been trying to, as they mentioned, apply for funding through different sources for several years for this project. I believe they've also applied to St. John's.
They did
for
get a
cost share
grant.
match.
They got a grant from St. John's River Water Management District and also from the Sebastian Clam Bake Foundation, which is here in November. And they raised, I think, $10,000 for this project just from that event.
That's great. Thank you for explaining that. And then the yellow band, I'm new here, of course. Why is it in yellow? What does it mean that it's in yellow?
It means that it's not fully fundable. So if you look all the way to the right on that column, there's only $56,000 left from the original $500,000 in this total category, and they're requesting $150,000. So it's listed yellow as because it's only partially funded. We don't have enough to fully fund it.
Okay.
And we will address those in the second sequence of discussions once we, handle the ones that are clearly funded. We have solution sets that we're going to bring to you for the two projects that are on the bubble.
And just historically, we'll go through and kind of look at the ones that are clearly funded based on the recommendations of the advisory groups. And then there's always in each category, depending on the year, one or two that's either partially funded or because of certain different variables that may or may not happen could be funded. And then we kind of go back and talk, and that's the yellow ones. And then we'll go back and kind of discuss what options we might have for those moving forward.
Okay.
Just
Thank
as
you.
a
Thank
process.
So in habitat restoration, we had 3 projects, 2 of them which were within the funding range. The first one is from the University of Florida, IFAS. This is a clam restoration project that addresses the CCMP filter feeder vital sign. It's phase 2 of this project, where the first phase is being funded this year, current fiscal year. UF is requesting $122,020 of our council funds, and they have committed an additional $156,404 as match. The second year of this project, this particular one will produce an additional 2 to 3 million clams for clam restoration in key areas throughout the lagoon. The second ranked project is from Sea and Shoreline LLC. This is a seagrass restoration project in Tucker Cove, which is just north of Fort Pierce Inlet. It was chosen due to its no motor access. They are requesting $85,000 of our council funds, and Sea and Shoreline has committed $125,158 as match. And this project will restore 2 acres of the Haladuli wrighty species of seagrass. In community-based restoration, there were 7 projects, 3 of which were in the green for funding. The top-ranked project is from the University of Central Florida. It's an oyster and living shoreline restoration project using non-plastic alternative materials. UCF is requesting $99,233 of our all-council funds, and they have committed $127,914 as match. This project will restore a 1/4 acre of oyster reef and stabilize 1,000 linear feet of shoreline with 2,000 plants using 500 plus volunteer hours over a minimum of 10 events. This project and several others you will see here that are highly ranked respond to a growing priority from permit agencies to decrease and end the use of plastics in oyster reef restoration programs. The third ranked project is from Florida Oceanographic Society. This is a project to develop and deploy plastic-free alternatives for oyster reef restoration. Florida Oceanographic Society is requesting $22,364 of our council funds, and they have committed $18,288 in match. This project will use at least 600 volunteer hours to deploy and evaluate success, and the prototypes will be deployed mainly around Jensen Beach Causeway to Stork Causeway. Did I go? Oh, I missed the land trust. I'm sorry. I skipped over that one. The second ranked project, which is above Florida Oceanographic, is from Indian River Land Trust. And this is a finfish restoration project within the land trust protected and managed wetlands. It's a multi-year project, and in this first year, they're requesting $73,950 of IRL Council funds. The land trust has committed $74,131 in match. The project will capture and tag juvenile fish in 4 mosquito impoundments in the Vero Beach area using volunteers from several fishing clubs. The goal of this project is to optimize juvenile fish recruitment from these marshes to the lagoon. In our last category, the science innovation with the EPA funds, there were 2 projects that were within the fully funding range and 1 that was partially funded, as you see here in yellow. The top ranked project was from the University of Central Florida. This UCF project examines microbial dynamics and sources of microplastics in the Indian River Lagoon. They're requesting $56,941 from EPA Section 320 funds and have committed $34,136 in match. The study will investigate the source of microplastics in the IRL with a focus on stormwater outfalls. The study will evaluate whether plastics provide a transport mechanism for toxic microbes such as Vibrio and other bacteria. The study will evaluate the potential risk of the transport mechanism for oyster consumption and human health. And the other fully fundable project in this is from Brevard County Natural Resource Management Department. This project is a small pilot study to test steel gabions and concrete core modules as plastic alternatives for oyster reef and bag restoration. They are requesting $1,750 from Section 320, and they have committed $625 in cost share.
Sure,
Yes.
just a general comment on plastics. We all have been reading the press on that, and I walk and run the beach in the morning at low tide and boat out on the Gulf Stream and on the Sargassomeweed, and maybe it's because of the hurricane wiping out the northern Bahamas, my favorite place to go in the summer, or just a combination of that and just more plastics in our environment. I've never seen so many baby sea turtles washing ashore dead from having ingested plastics out in the Sargassomeweed, and their stomachs are full of plastics. And I've never seen so many dead seabirds. I'm seeing 2 or 3 every time I run, and I never saw any in where I live in Castaway Cove and Vero ever. And I'm seeing it repeatedly. But a lot of baby leatherbacks, greens, hawksbills, and they're washing ashore, and I've lived on the Bear Island of Florida. My dad moved up here from Jamaica in 1958, and so I've never, ever seen this. So the plastics in our environment have got to go. I think the Lagoon Council ought to join or move with as many groups as possible to remove plastics from the environment of Florida waterways as soon as we can. I'm seeing everything from the balloons of the Disney ships out in the Sargassomeweed that are floating there, and they claim they don't have balloons in their ship, but they all say Mickey Mouse on them that I collect and put in my boat, to the lagoon. They float in the lagoon. I've seen plastics out in the sandbar in the Stewart Inlet, where I keep my boat down there, and I boat out of the Stewart Inlet from Pirates Cove, and I'm seeing a ton of plastics on incoming tide. My favorite place to throw an anchor, and that's the sandbar in Stewart Inlet. So it's all over our environment. I know Dwayne knows this being a surfer, and I'm a surfer, where we're seeing it everywhere, and it needs to go. And Florida is a wet environment. We rely on this water for everything we do, from farming to tourism to recreating, and we got to take care of it, and we need to remove those plastics and be as aggressive as we can, because they're there. And maybe Dorian, it's still an aftermath of Dorian, but I've never, ever have seen it. And people are walking up and putting in the trash cans big things of plastic every day, and I've never seen all those people doing that ever in my life as they are. It used to be cigarette butts, now it's all plastics. So just a general comment to this council and to the all the counties here. As aggressive as we all can be from all of our places from the St. John's where I sit, I'm going to encourage Ann to be as aggressive as she can be and wherever we can, and Dwayne from where we sit, be as aggressive in joining other entities because it's showing up on a level I don't think I've ever dreamed I'd see in my lifetime living in Florida. So just a general comment.
All right, any other comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
We have 3 projects in this list you've seen that are all related to plastic. We have been working with DEP, the Water Management District, even the Corps of Engineers in facilitating discussions amongst our partners doing mainly oyster reef restoration and looking for these alternatives. And so part of what we're going to do, should you move these projects forward, is hopefully we will see what works and what doesn't, and from these 3 projects we'll be able to guide in a more effective manner the appropriate kinds of reef structures in the appropriate locations. You know, it sounds kind of easy, let's stop using plastics, but we have been, Aaron, we've probably been talking about the challenge of those alternative materials for, I'd say, as long as I've been your executive director. Plastic works really well, but it's impossible to have a credible position saying, you know, let's get plastics out of the water, and then we're doing oyster reefs in plastic. So, you know, I didn't expect we'd see this many proposals, but they're reflecting a real, you know, issue that we have under the permitting requirements. I'm happy to see where we are, and just a reminder, when we passed the CCMP, we were not shy on this issue. It is one of the primary focal points of the EPA at a federal level right now, but we said trash-free by 2030. So if we're going to meet that obligation, we have a lot of work to do in this vital sign for the lagoon.
Most definitely. All right. All right, so that's the general.
That's all the green ones, yep.
Okay, so that's the general overview of the ranked projects. My suggestion to move forward is let's go ahead, as we normally do, and address the projects in green, and then we can move on and deal with how to deal with the projects in yellow. So if that's agreeable to everybody, just to kind of simplify the process, we would need to make a motion. They need to be separate motions, correct?
For each category.
For each category.
Yes, for each category, you need to do really 2 motions. The first is to essentially accept and approve the ranking, and then the second motion deals with the funding of the projects that have been recommended, which are the ones in green. So if you look at the agenda, each bucket of projects is kind of broken into those 2 action items.
Okay.
And so for each of those, there would be a motion for first to approve the ranking with any public comment, and then also the second motion would be the motion to fund in that particular bucket, again with any public comment.
Okay. So if that's agreeable to everybody, we'll just need a motion in each category. So the first one is going to be water quality, to accept the management conference recommendations and approve the final ranked list of proposals. That would be the first motion, and the second motion would be to accept the management conference recommendations to fund the top proposals contingent and consistent with available funds and budgetary authority, and authorize staff to negotiate and enter into contracts with those applicants.
I'll move the recommendations and the final ranked list of proposals.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any comment from the public? And this is under water quality?
Under water quality.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Under water quality, I would move to accept the recommendations to fund the top proposals listed with available funds.
And to authorize?
And to authorize staff to negotiate and enter into contracts with those applicants.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anybody from the public wishing to speak on this? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And the next will be under habitat restoration.
Under habitat restoration, I would move that we accept the recommendations and approve the final ranked list of proposals.
I have a motion. Is there a second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anybody from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Under habitat restoration, I would move that we accept the recommendations to fund the top proposals consistent with the available funds and budgetary authority, and authorize staff to negotiate and enter into contracts with those applicants.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next will be under community-based restoration.
Under community-based restoration, I would move to accept recommendations and approve the final ranked list of proposals.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Under community-based restoration, I would move approval of the recommendations to fund the top proposals contingent and consistent with available funds and budgetary authority, and authorize staff to negotiate and enter into the contracts with those applicants.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is going to be science and innovation.
Under science and innovation, I would move to accept the recommendations and approve the final ranked list of proposals.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Under science and innovation, I would move to accept the recommendations to fund the top proposals contingent and consistent with the available funds and budgetary authority, and authorize staff to negotiate and enter into the contracts with those applicants.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so let's look at the two projects in yellow. You want to start with the EPA one since?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start with the EPA, but before I begin, I just want to clarify for the record and for you all how this all works on those projects that are below this cut list. We're going to look at the two yellow. I think we have staff solutions for both. But those other projects that fell above 70%, we hold those as active potential projects should revenue appear. You know, we are in a legislative session right now. I don't know of any, windfalls of revenue, but there's always a hope, and we're always out looking for more dollars. And so those projects don't fall off the list during this year. This stays as an active, fundable list. But I do want to say this. Every year I have said that I was disappointed in the quality of proposals. This year, those proposals, especially in the first three categories, were substantially better. So we saw more sophisticated, much more detail. Sad to say, in the science side, I was very disappointed in the quality of some of those proposals. So it's my intent, and staff doesn't know this yet, but we have 3 contracted grant writers who assist our partners in writing proposals. We do not let them use those grant writers for our grants, but we let them go out and find money. So if they wanted to go to another source, because it's a conflict for us to, fund a grant writer to come back and then ask us for money. You'll see in the budget when Dan goes through, we never have fully spent that. So we're going to reach out to each one of these proposers, touch base, the ones that aren't funded, see if we can help them find additional funds to move them forward. We facilitate that. And we have been successful in the past. And those that didn't rank this year, I have not done this in the past, and I don't know how to do this efficiently, but I'm thinking we need a workshop, outside of our RFP, to have a conversation about how do you do a really good proposal that's competitive, because we are pretty clear, and a lot of what is making these projects unfundable is just not understanding the process of how to write a proposal that is very clearly defined, in our numeric ranking. All they have to do is answer those questions, and document their position. And, every single one of these projects, even the ones that were ranked low, except for maybe one or two, are good projects, just poorly written or poorly demonstrated. So with that, we'll keep working with this group.
And just to circle back on this being a living funding list, the 70%, every year, and I believe last year we had some projects mid-year because we had some funding open up that we were able to go back and off the list and add some more dollars to.
I'm glad you brought that up. We will never jump projects just by protocol and process. And so if we had 50,000 become available, and the next three projects in line were 150, 100, 95, and then there was one for 50, we wouldn't take that 50,000 and jump over projects that were ranked higher in order to move them into the, into the funded list. We would wait till next year. They would come back and put those projects back through. But, we try to get as many of these projects moving forward. And we know where money is that maybe we can't get as an EPA, NEP. We try not to compete with our partners. And so, we're all going to be looking for, how do you move more of these projects forward with our money or with somebody else's, especially the ones that were ranked highly. So let's look at category 4 first. And remember, this is the EPA bucket of funds. And so for the first time, we had a 10% increase. When we put our work plan proposal together for EPA, it has to be explicit in the projects that are being funded. So we do not go to the EPA with reserves. We take that, in this case, $660,500, and we will bring a work plan to them, and then we will execute that work plan under the EPA guidance. Each of those projects can go 3 years in no-cost extensions. Most important to us in the 5-year window of EPA funds is that we also have a grant that's 5 years. So we have a contract with EPA on the draw of Treasury funds. And so you'll see this come up in this discussion when we talk about budgets. Cash reserves are a big deal. We only do 2 draws a year. So that's $660,000. While it's available to us, we only draw it twice a year out of the U.S. Treasury. So Dan is watching our cash flows. And so everything I recommend to you as staff has contemplated cash flow position, budget, which we'll look at in a minute, and where we are. So for this particular project, it's Florida Atlantic University. They're using a monitoring system for microcystin toxin using a technique called solid phase absorption toxin testing. And that's even above my head. They've got really good scientists, including, the head of Harbor Branch now, who's on the governor's harmful algal bloom task force. Toxin testing has been recommended both in the blue-green task force and in the red tide, the harmful algal bloom task force that I serve on. And this is a human health issue. And so part of the reason we're moving this forward within this bucket is we think it's really important to get that testing when we need it. So the project budget requests $94,580. We have $41,309 available in that category pursuant to your direction on that category earlier this year. And staff's recommendation is to pull money out of our tentative budget reserves. We've got some reserve funds that are not obligated to projects and to fund this fully. And so your motion, should you decide to move in that direction, would be to move this project forward. And then your motion to us would be exactly like you just did with the other categories, but it would include moving that EPA grant to development submission, before the June 1. And so that's our recommendation from the staff side is, let's use some available reserves and move that project forward to complete our EPA grant proposal.
Are there any questions on that or comments? Utilizing the reserves is not going to put us in a...
We're in tentative budget right now, and so we know we've got cash reserves that you are not seeing yet because we're not through this year's audit process. And if you remember last year, for example, we didn't use the reserves last year. Some of that's going to come forward, and we will have those numbers, we hope, or at least they may not be fully audited and sealed, but we'll have really good estimates coming into final budget at the May meeting. So I am not at all concerned about this decision from a financial standpoint.
Okay. Any other comments or questions of staff on this? And what's y'all's pleasure?
So you're needing a motion to move it forward, is that?
So next slide, the motion slide.
With funding coming out of reserves.
Yeah, so here's the three-part motion, very similar. And in fact, Carolyn, I think on this one, they need to approve ranking first, correct? Actually,
we just approved all of the ranking.
Yeah, they've already approved the ranking. Really, all you need to do is to go ahead and authorize funding of the project and negotiation of the contract, which would be the last bullet, and then also approve a motion to authorize staff to develop the work plan and submit it to EPA.
Okay, so we were accurate in this slide.
So in order to move forward, we need a motion to authorize staff to negotiate the contract contingent on EPA award of grant.
That's fine.
Motion to authorize staff to negotiate a contract contingent on EPA award of grant.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And then the next thing we would need to do is authorize staff to develop the 2021 EPA work plan grant proposal and submit before June 1st.
Good? Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. If that is agreeable, I would ask for such a motion.
So move.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So that should take care of science and innovation. So we'll move back to the water quality.
Okay, the fourth ranked project, the town of Sewell's Point, we actually have a history with this, and so I want to walk you through kind of where we are. So we had a new proposal this cycle requesting $150,000, and you can see there's a significant cost share match here. And we have a funding deficit, but this is really not a new proposal. 2 cycles ago, we funded this project in its original, what I would call PD&E phase, and it was called the Margarita Mandalay Stormwater Improvement Project. So back in fiscal year 2017, 2018, we funded this highly ranked project at $180,000. And for a whole bunch of reasons, both the complexity of the project, hurricane issues, there have been no draws against that contract. They have been giving us quarterly reports. And so when this came through to us, as a new project, we felt compelled that we had to move it through this RFP process. I think in the future, and I've already talked to the city, we could have maybe done this independent of this RFP process, but in fact we have more transparency, more review, and once again it was ranked very highly, 4th in that list. And I can tell you, my staff and we do not get engaged in any of these ranking and reviews, but in this case I'm going to tell you, this is a good project that needs to move forward, has considerable match and funding. And Aaron Watkins and I, just this week, were talking about this connection between stormwater and wastewater and stormwater and septic. you know, you can fix one, but if, you know, you haven't fixed the other, you still have problems. And so here's a perfect example, you know, of a major stormwater project that has long-term implications to the current wastewater situation in the city. So what we're proposing, and we do not have enough cash in our budget to comfortably recommend moving this forward at this time. But Dan and I have looked carefully at what we think our cash position is pre-audit. I'm already working on a possible new revenue source, a grant in another place, which would free up money. And so we are recommending that you do two things, really. You know, go ahead and table a final discussion on funding until your May meeting, when we bring a full budget, the final budget, full detail, and additional dollars to the table, because I think we're in a gray area if you're going to encumber dollars that we don't actually see, you know, in our budget. But the motion, it really is to direct staff, which is your executive director, to go find the $90,000 and make this happen. And that's exactly what we'll do, and come back in May, include this, you know, we'll have a final motion, you know, with full funding, give us a chance to work through some of the details with the city. You know, we have an existing contract that does not include these new additions. And so we'll need to work with our council, you know, to work through what's that new contract. And I believe it's just amending our existing contract in a scope of work change and a timeline to make sure that, you know, we are in full compliance. So the only thing that I see that we'll need to work with the city and their representatives is to make sure that the draws on this contract for the new fiscal year are happening in an appropriate and legal, you know, fiduciary way. So we can't obligate funds that are in next year's fiscal year for work that's happening, you know, like next month, you know. So we're gonna need to work out the timeline, the contract language. I am comfortable and confident that we will find, you know, those dollars and make this happen. We want it to happen. And it's a good project, but we have some cleanup to do, because I'd like to bring the recommendation to move forward with that contract language, the amended contract language, and we'll wrap this all up into just a single project. Because right now I've got one project with a proposal from 2 years ago, you know, with 180,000 that's into its almost third year, and this new proposal for next fiscal year, and I want to tie those together in a clean, single document under contract. And so we know we're all moving in the same direction with good fiduciary transparency. So that's my recommendation as staff, but we will do whatever you all choose to do on this.
So what I'm hearing is you guys just need a little bit more time to make this a more efficient and effective project in the whole, and clarify that funding mechanism?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any...
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion to direct Dr. DeFries and staff to identify funding sources and present a funding plan for the IRL Council portion of the Sewells Point Stormwater Project at the May 6, 2020 board meeting.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anybody from the public?
You have one.
Good morning. My name is Joe Capper. I'm the town of Sewells Point engineer. When there's a motion on the table that seems to be favorable to me, I'm a little reluctant to say too many things, but I do want to say one thing. Yeah, first of all, the town appreciates the funding that this board has provided to them in the past. Last week, I explained to the Water Management District in 1994, the Water Management District provided us $50,000 to do a master stormwater plan in town, and we identified 36 projects. Well, the 34th project that we are working on is the Mandalay Margarita project. It's by far the largest project. In 1994, it was about a $300,000 project, and as you can see from the numbers here, it's over $3 million now. But I would like you to know that we not only have a better project now, there's several things we do. The more funding we're asking for now is for more stormwater quality treatment, okay? So there is going to be between 60 and 24% additional reduction in nutrient reductions, okay? And that's phosphorus and nitrogen. That's an important thing to understand. The second thing is the size of the project has increased from 20 acres to 30 acres, okay? So we've increased the size of the project, but besides handling stormwater quality treatment, nutrient load reduction, and flood control, we are now contending with, and the things that have pushed us back a little in time is during the last hurricanes, we've been noticing a sea level rise, height, king tides, and so we have to make some adjustments for those items, and those things have played a part in this. So we are handling resiliency now, and so I just want you to know the town appreciates the funding, whatever funding you give us. We certainly support Dwayne's recommendation here today, and certainly we hope you will continue providing us help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, there is a motion and a second. If there's no more discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that
I think that
covers-
wraps the RFP, except we're going to work you through now some budget issues.
Okay.
And you'll actually see the actions that you just took. I took a little gamble with Dan this morning. I told him to kind of tweak the budget to reflect kind of where that money is, so you can kind of see, and this is detail, so very important. You're going to pass, and it's in your package, a rolled up budget that's in a resolution as a tentative budget, but we like to show you the detail so you can see exactly, you know, how we are looking at line item projects as we move forward. And so when we're done with this next step in May, we're going to bring you kind of the full picture in a business plan, something that doesn't happen very often in NEPs, but we actually will bring you a full business plan. It's a very nice book. Have every anticipation it's already going to have, you know, the Sewell's Point project in it, anticipating that we're just going to move forward, and you will have that final budget to look at and to pass that by resolution. Dan, it's all yours.
So as Dwayne said, we had the detailed budget here, and what's nice about our resolution is no matter how you guys voted on any of those yellow projects, it wouldn't have affected that resolution at all. So the big takeaway here from this in the revenue section is, as Dwayne said, we got a 10% increase in EPA funding in December. So we have an additional $62,500. May look like there's not quite as much just because last year we had a supplemental that was like 1 year only. So, but it's still a modest gain. In our expenditure details, this is mostly the EPA work plan. This kind of is what we need to have in by June 1st. What we had last year was a monitoring habitat restoration plan for $50,000. We're holding back just a little bit, $25,000 for each this year. The voter's guide will be finished. Our asset mapping is continuing again this year. You see the science and innovation increase for the proposals that you already ranked and voted on. The state Lagoon is going into its second year, so that stays the same. We have a slight increase for cost of living, and it was, the Florida average is 1.8 to 2.4, and we chose a 2% increase. In our communication support, we have a significant increase, but this is due to an expanded and enhanced communication of the CCMP. The CCMP projects and planning documents that are going to be finishing up this year, the monitoring habitat and resilience plans. We plan to expand publication of those. We're going to do scientific publication support for the HAB workshop and the 2020 IRL symposium, which is happening next week. And we're also going to expand social media and website content and public outreach, which we were discussing in our Citizens Advisory Council. We're also continuing our technical supportive conferences and workshops. We're going to be continuing our HAB monitoring network that we have between 2 contractors. That's a 5-year contract. We have EPA travel again, and 1 Lagoon data management. And I want to just point out real quickly that you see here the adopted budget for 1920. Some of these in the 2021 have already been amended into our current budget. So even though it looks like there's an increase, it's already been brought into our current budget. And then you see here under other expenditures with council contributions, I did, as Wayne said, take the gamble and put that amount in from reserves to fully fund the SPAT project. We have our $500,000 from water quality, 207 in habitat, and 195 in community-based, based on the all in green proposals you already looked at. And this is our administrative services. And this part of the budget has really stayed the same from last year. There was a significant decrease in administrative services to this year, and that was because of IT and compliance, ADA compliance. We put a heavy amount into remediate the website, get all our documents up to ADA compliance. That phase will be ending this year, so we figure the reduced amount would cover maintenance costs.
And Dan, before you go on, go ahead and mention the legal services.
So we have legal services with Carolyn Ansay here. We have never, ever gotten to that expenditure amount, but we are always fearful that should somebody sue us or something, we might need it. So even though, you know, I've looked through the past 4 or 5 years, it's never gotten above 40. We don't want to get ourselves into a pickle.
And Madam Chair, I'm going to jump in and give staff kudos. Both Dan's predecessor and Dan work really closely on contracting with our attorney. And so those savings are an efficiency between our contracted legal service and staff. So a lot of that paralegal, and Dan picked it up way faster than I thought he would, because, you know, that's a kind of a specialized area. We're saving a lot of money just because we work so well with our legal staff. So we really appreciate that interaction. I watch it from a distance and try not to micromanage, but a lot of that savings is because we're working so well with contractors.
That's great.
Any other major or significant increases only was in administrative costs, and that is just basically because we have a larger staff. We're going to have more travel, and we plan on doing more printing of publications of certain materials.
Are there any questions?
Is there any question about that?
No? All right.
And as you can you go back one? I just want to highlight. So we have that, the 59,000 in our reserve. We'd taken the 53 out to fund that project. We're expecting the rollover after audit to help increase that reserve to be able to fully fund Sewell's Point.
Okay.
Move approval.
Here's the resolution.
We have you want to move approval of the budget? We have a motion and a second?
Your motion is going to be on the roll-up budget,
Yeah,
which you're
this
seeing there. So just to be clear, it's a resolution. You'll need public, hearing on the roll-up. The detail, we just wanted to let you know where it was all going.
Okay. So do you want to continue, or did you want, Doug, were you making that motion on the roll-up budget?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. So there is a motion on the budget with a second. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak on this? No? Any discussion from the board? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Dr. DeFries.
Gosh, I'm excited. We just made a lot of work to start next October. And it's kind of, when you look at this, our calendar year with the federal, we are so far ahead. So we know exactly what we're going to be starting on as of your action. So thank you very much.
Oh, before you get started on this, because you have some exciting stuff in there, can you address, I know there was one of our advisory board members, there was an editorial in TCPOM, and I know there's some policies and procedures that we have in place. Could you kind of address those and maybe just kind of give a general update on that? Because I know it's
Yes, I
floating
can.
around.
Do we have that slide in this deck? I hope we do. There we go. Good reminder, it's the beginning of the calendar year, and we did these reminders with our 3 advisory boards this week. We remain under sunshine, and we have all of that documentation on our website for our volunteers. And Carolyn Ansay actually did a Sunshine 101, so it's a very easy document. If somebody's concerned about sunshine, they can ask us or go online, and we reminded our members. We have almost 100 now. Is it over 100? Volunteers. And so it's a lot of people representing a lot of agencies. Some of them are advocacy groups. Some of them are, major groups. So a couple of years ago, the council, and Commissioner Zadowski probably remembers this, we first decided we needed an advocacy position because we were being approached for kind of getting involved in permits, construction permits. And so this is our policy as written. That policy is, in our policy guidance. It's shown to all our volunteers, and it basically states that our members who are volunteers can't speak on behalf of the council or the NEP as part of our management conference unless they have been expressly directed to do so from you, the board of directors. What's beautiful about this is that it is exactly what a management conference can and could do. Each of you represents your counties or your agencies, but when we get in the room in a national estuary program, this management conference vision that's now 30 years old kind of takes all that self-interest, doesn't take it away, but we're here to try to find kind of the agreement, the consensus to move forward. And sadly, occasionally, you get close to the line and occasionally somebody steps over it. This has happened once before. But on January 28th, there was an op-ed in TCPOM, about how to fix Florida's water crisis and how to pay for it. This would not be an issue before you today had that individual who's on a management conference just used the affiliation with the local Clean Water Coalition of Indian River, but they also mentioned that this person is a management board member of the IRL Council, and that violates policy. So we have done all of the informational discourse with that individual and with all of our board members to remind them that that is a policy violation. And I think that part of it is done, but this op-ed has some information in it that is inaccurate. And so for the record, we wanted to make sure that you all knew as our council that my staff and I, had never had prior knowledge of that op-ed. If we had, we would have corrected the errors in it. We encourage, in fact, all of our agencies, if somebody wants to do any kind of information, we're available to provide facts. And so my phone started ringing off the hook. It was a surprise to me, and we felt that we need to at least address it here with you with some clarifications of where the state is in relationship to this issue, because we're in a session now, and I can say this with no hesitancy, been here 40 years, been in the trenches for almost that whole time. I have never seen a time in the state of Florida where I've seen water policy more dominant. This is largely a result of Governor DeSantis's leadership and vision. So I just wanted to make a couple points as we kind of look at this, just to clarify the record, and you'll know after this kind of where I'm going to take this. So water management districts and staff have been working with the governor and actually all the agencies on a number of policy changes, including water quality, nutrient remediation actions, investment strategies, biosolids management, enforcement. In fact, at the beginning of the session, I got online, started to count bills that had water or Indian River Lagoon, forgetting about all the appropriation bills on the rest of the state, and I had over 50 bills that I've been tracking. Many of those probably aren't going to get into committee or into, into conference, but the fact is water is a priority at all levels of state government right now, both in policy and appropriation. There was a statement in this article about water management districts and their role in enforcement. And just to clarify the record, water management districts work in the science side of basin management action plans. And they are the science that drives the rules. And DEP, uses that science, the TMDLs and the BMAPs, as a process for implementing that 5-year plan. Many of our BMAPs are in revision as we speak. They're all over the next 5-year cycle going to get a look. And so they will revise on a 5-year cycle. These are public meetings, they're science driven, but they're also stakeholder driven because there's stakeholder involvement. And so, this is a process of moving nutrient remediation forward with the stakeholders. Whether it's regulated under a basin management action plan or, as you well know, a reasonable assurance plan that Volusia County just passed and moved forward. You're going to see in our annual report a list. We hear very similar to this opinion that nobody's doing anything. The lagoon's dead and nobody's doing anything. You're going to see in our annual report evidence that suggests that's not the case. I asked Kathy when we started our annual report for this year, and by the way, you have that annual report on your thumb drives in your packages. We said, ask our community partners what's going on in their agencies beyond what we fund within our work plan and business plan. We didn't know how many projects would get sent to us. It was 166, wasn't it? 161 projects just last year were underway. We highlight those. And so this idea that, we're not moving the ball forward is just simply inaccurate. And also this idea that projects aren't being funded and implemented, also inaccurate. And it is true, and there's a lot of, I think, basic, truth. We all know that this process is going to be expensive. When you look at infrastructure improvements, whether it's wastewater, stormwater, septic to sewer, we are looking at billions of dollars of infrastructure improvements, and we have evidence within our CCMP and our economic studies that just in the lagoon it's going to be more than several billion, maybe as much as 4 to 5, to do all of the work we need to do. And we recognize that you don't do that all at once. It's taken us, half a century and more to get into this position. And as we begin to move forward implementing these projects, we know that this investment strategy is going to take some time. And yes, some of it is going to be incremental. Septic to sewer, you just don't, snap your fingers and all of a sudden you have trunk lines to every place you want. And so we're going to be at this for some time. Addressing these challenges is really about shared burden, local, regional, state, and federal, as it should be, and as we all, whether it's DEP, the Water Management District through their cost share. So I reached out to DEP, and in the last 4.5 years, St. John's River Water Management District, St. John's in the last 4.5 years has completed 183 cost share projects. By September 2020, their investment will be $119 million. DEP has its local cost share, plus Section 320 stormwater and multiple other ways of funding. And so we're all in this, money is moving. We know it's, we need more. We always need more, but there is a lot of investment happening right now. That is in kind of opposition to the tone of this, that somehow you were all playing around the fringes of restoration. But we know there's a lot of work to do. So the last thing I want to just remind you, because I think we were somewhat visionary in a scary way when we changed our mission statement some 3 years ago. The National Estuary Program set a mission: one lagoon, one community, one voice. And we did that recognizing that we have to work together to make that happen. And so I'm sure we're going to have these moments, where, we've got issues of special interest, somebody, and I've been there, by the way, I've been over that gray line at least a couple times since I've been your executive director. This is going to happen. We need to continue to make sure our volunteers recognize that they do not represent you, that we are all in a unified one lagoon, one voice, one community representation. And so when you as a policy board pass a resolution like you did on biosolids, passed a resolution like you did on on 520 Causeway expansion, and also give me direction on both federal and state appropriations, once you do that, then our people can use that anywhere they want, anytime, because you are on the record with the policy guidance. And so with that, we'll continue our education. I don't think, it's sad to, have this kind of turmoil, with misinformation, but what I will do over the next week is that we will get some bullets up, just factual bullets on our website. I've asked Kayleen to start, let's start throwing some of these, what I call good story facts, in our website and also our social media, and make sure that at least the good work we are all doing at every level, especially the local, cities and communities, are better understood and known by our general public. So with that, I know that was a little lengthy, but this is a policy issue and one that we need to take seriously.
And I appreciate you addressing it. I wanted to make sure that not only the board, but also our partners here and on a federal level and a state level are aware that we are addressing it. We take that seriously, and we'll get some information out there to share our good story.
That's why we have Kayleen on board. Her plate, drinking from the fire hose. I don't know when she joined us if she actually realized what she was getting herself into. Want to back me up one? So I'm going to be really brief. So legislatively, I kind of mentioned it, I can't tell you what's going to pass and what's not, nor will I even talk about specific policies that are moving through the Florida legislature right now in the House and the Senate, other than to say the Indian River Lagoon is in prominent play. Funding and policies are moving forward. I think we'll have a clearer picture of what gets stranded before committee here in a week or so. I am really optimistic about the changes I see, changes not just in the funding side, but also the agencies are reorganizing. Resilience is going to be a big issue as we move forward. I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Julia Neshwat just last week down at that lower bullet at the Southeastern Caribbean Disaster Recovery Partnership. We are now a member and will participate with that regional group. At the federal level, though, I do want to say something. We have movement on two levels. And so for our appropriation requests for next year, the 2021 cycle, we have bipartisan support both in the House and the Senate for appropriations to our full authorized amount. So this year you saw that extra $60,000. We are authorized and have been for the last 5 years at $750,000. And so we are working really hard up there on appropriations to get the full amount that is authorized by Congress. And then in a bit of a surprise to me, and I've given you both of these bills, we have a House Bill 4044 that was actually heard on the floor this week. We have a number of Florida representatives supporting that bill, but I want to do a special thanks to Congressman Brian Mast, who took the floor in debate in support of the National Estuary Program. And more importantly, they are supporting in this bipartisan House bill a doubling of the financing of the appropriation level from NEPs. This is nationwide, from $26.4 million to $50 million a year. That could get us as much, depending on how this sorts out, as much as $1 million base per NEP. And also surprising is usually it takes a long time for the Senate to have companion bills. We have a Senate companion bill. It's Senate Bill 3171, also bipartisan support, also at that same number. The only difference between these two bills is the House bill talks about the competitive grants program that's run through EPA, and that was a change that happened in 2016. Those dollars have not yet been released, but we understand there may be an RFP call for those competitive grants sometime this calendar year to start moving that money, to those grant recipients. That competitive portion is not in the Senate bill, so there'll be some reconciliation there. I don't know how the timeline is with this, but I am guardedly optimistic with a lot of work among the NEPs that we will be able to move us to a little different financial position and full reauthorization over the next 2 years. With that said, I was drafted. I didn't volunteer. I was drafted. I now, as of about 2 weeks ago, am the elected External Affairs representative for the National Association of National Estuary Programs. So I get to represent us, but actually all 28 National Estuary Programs as I move through the halls of Congress doing our work. Not like we needed any additional work here. Yeah, be careful what meetings you go to. In your thumb drive, we have the One Lagoon call to action video, and we also have the PDF form of the new annual report. I want to give kudos to staff, especially Kayleen and especially Kathy. That annual report isn't produced externally. She does it all internally. All of the narratives, all of the photos, all of the typesetting, that all happened, basically since we met last meeting, because she was working on the calendar. I think it's an amazing looking document. We will have it ready to show the governor and the legislature at Oceans Day in a few weeks up on the Hill. We will bring boxes to each of you. We will hand deliver hard copies like we do with calendars. And anybody who says, God, there's nothing going on in this lagoon, they can't say it if they read this document and they're honest. We have a map. We show what's happened in the last year, and it's pretty impressive. Florida Harmful Algal Bloom Task Force. There's 2 task forces. I serve on one. Actually, so does Chuck Jacoby. So Dr. Jacoby and I can no longer in the public sector say red and tide in the same room because we are under sunshine, but we both serve the Harmful Algal Bloom Task Force at FWC. You know that we have a blue-green algae task force through DEP. My understanding now is that both our letter from the HAB task force and our first consensus document is now in the public sector. We supported the blue-green task force recommendations. We focus almost exclusively on red tides for this first go-around, and stay tuned. We will start to expand our activities in that committee, which dovetails really closely with decisions you all made and we made to start making more investment in harmful algal blooms within this program. So we are monitoring, on a regular basis, lagoon-wide for HABs as we speak. And then lastly, 2 upcoming events. Actually, one other I want to speak to. There is a draft, and I don't know if you've seen it yet, Aaron. There is a draft economic study just completed by the Florida Ocean Alliance. I serve on that board. That is an economic study for the entire state of Florida for the ocean and coastal economy, the big picture economy. I'm not going to mention the number now because it may still be under review at DEP. That will be released, we believe, at Oceans Day. The number is bigger than I imagined. 4 or 5 years ago, we were thinking $700 billion in GDP value, and it's actually more than that. So we are looking at a cornerstone of the economy of the state, and we are working actively with Florida Ocean Alliance and dozens of partners, including DEP. Sometime around May, there will be an ocean and coastal planning document, a strategy for moving forward which will be then directed to the governor, DEP, FWC, and all the partners. That'll go through a public review, and we have been intimately involved in that development, including writing over the last 3 weeks the draft economy section for that document. So on top of all this RFP stuff, we've been moving a lot of product the last month. And then next week we have the IRL Science Symposium at Harbor Branch. I think it's the 11th? 13th. I'm sad to say it's already completely closed for the technical session. That auditorium is now a full house. But we are going to put on our website, Harbor Branch will be live streaming it and also YouTubing after the effect all of the presentations during the technical phase of it. But Friday is still open for the public. They still have some room in registration for the public kind of general consensus group. That Wednesday, Dr. Chuck Jacoby and I will be talking to what will soon become our new task force within the NEP. And gosh, we don't want to call it another harmful algal bloom task force, but it is the Super Bloom Consortium, the scientists who were convened by the Water Management District during the Super Bloom. We are going to keep that group together, and they are now going to be a task force to us. And we are putting some investment through our EPA funds, including that EPA supplemental, to make sure all of these task forces are talking to each other. So stay tuned on that. And then this is new news, and I really need some help with you all, especially at the counties. We have been able to attract the Marine Technology Society, which is an international society, to the Indian River Lagoon. On April 1 and 2, we will do a technology surge, a tech surge with MTS. We were able to convince the Marine Technology Society that we wanted to talk more than just sensors, large ocean sensors, and so we have included water quality remediation in the call. We will get that website out. We are going to have Kayleen starting to do pretty massive surges on that. But our goal is to get at least 50% of the participants from industry. We have already, put, I think, 280 invitations, something like that? Like 280 invitations to direct industry players that I've talked to in this role to try to get this as a private-public sector type partnership. So where I need your help in the counties is when we send this to you, if you would please get it to your EDCs, or if you have incubators, we want to make sure this goes beyond just the environmental community. If you've got, investment, VC investors that you're aware of, get that word out through that private sector. We hope to actually take this vision, depending on how this works. We're talking about maybe trying to do this on a regional basis with some regional partners in future years. And this is our beta test to see how well we can attract industry to the table. And you all know we're being bombarded with every industry idea to solve red tide or harmful algal blooms or cyanotoxins. And this is going to be an opportunity for industry to, if you've got something to show, bring it, give a presentation, and we'll see what you got. And I know the governor and DEP is going through a lot of vetting of possible technologies for harmful algal blooms. So stay tuned, but definitely register. When that registration gets full, that will be it for attending that 2-day meeting. And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
All right, any questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Dwayne, you brought up House Bill 4044 and 3171. In the past, when these have been floated through, we've suggested to the counties to create a resolution to support. Would that be helpful in this case, or are we still concerned about committees and bringing it together with amendments that may not be what we want as the outcome?
That's a good point. In fact, I was going to provide written testimony to the floor decision and actually was told hold because they had, you look at who the leadership in appropriations is, and of course you want to try to get their states, if they have NEP, weighing in. And so I'm pretty sure we will probably provide, and you have given me authority to do that anyway, to provide letters of support, but having resolutions from the county at the appropriate time would be very appropriate. I know that you have to go back to your boards or counties, so I will keep you apprised of the timeline, because it's surgical. You know, you want to put them in that surgical point where they're going to be viewed. And so what I'll do is I'll keep everybody kind of in the loop on this process as it moves forward. But we are, for the first time, looking quite strong in position in Washington, and I'm guardedly optimistic. The wheels can fall off these really quick. But if you all have interactions with any of our electeds, state or federal, you know, across the board, just say thank you. We have had strong congressional support, you know, from all of our Indian River Lagoon congressional delegations, Senate and House. I'm always disappointed that we are not unified as a state, especially on the House side, with 26, 27 House members. You would think every representative in the state of Florida from every district would be weighing in on these issues, and they don't. And that is typical of Florida. Doesn't happen with space and aviation. It's not happening with water, but that's why you hired me. So I'm going to be reaching beyond our borders to try to get additional support from the state of Florida for some of these bills. It's not like we haven't tried. We've done, you know, basically blasts between the 4 NEPs statewide, but when I look at who signs the letters, you know, if you look at these, you know, we have pretty good support along the lagoon right now, and we'll keep working that.
Thank you for that comment. Anybody else? No? All right. Thank you, Dr. DeFries.
Thank you.
All right. The next item is going to be Indian River Lagoon Council Board Member Reports. We'll start with St. Lucie and Commissioner Sebastian.
I'm going to save Mike today because this is really just a good news story and a gratification and a thank you to each and every one of you here and those at home and from the public that supported St. Lucie County's efforts in the open air commercial composting project that was presented in St. Lucie County. That project has now been withdrawn. The court cases have been withdrawn. And we fully support the FDEP's effort in the rulemaking process so that we can approach the biosolids issues. Largely, we know that the cost of doing projects after the fact and trying to remove contaminations from our water is very expensive. But from our position in St. Lucie County, and I think many of you share the same, but I won't speak for you, the same idea is that if we can remove and not have the products, the contaminations go into the system in the first place, we save millions and millions of dollars. So if we can create those opportunities through the FDEP rule changes, what we do in our water management systems and what we do as a county from a systemic standpoint, whether it's through planning and zoning and our stormwater projects, I think that we need to do that. Because if we're able to remove and actually before it ever goes in, never have the contaminations get into the system, we save taxpayers millions and millions of dollars. But in the meantime, there are systemic opportunities. We heard a number of issues with septic to sewer. St. Lucie County continues to move in that direction, as are each of you, I'm sure. So we will continue to do that and try to do this. But I just wanted to simply say thank you to the political entities. Indian River, you entered into that project with us, South Florida Water Management District. You were a part of that as well. But those at home, those private citizens who wrote, I can tell you that there were 4,400 emails and letters that were sent from St. Lucie County alone to support the Board of County Commissioners in our effort. Not to mention the number of community involvement sessions. We worked on science and education and proactive citizenry to be able to achieve our positive outcome. So I wanted to share that and again say thank you to the public for supporting our efforts and we hope to go forward that we'll have a better product so as we continue to protect our waterways before contamination ever gets in. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'm happy to champion what DEP has just accomplished. We just completed a record number of compliance inspections. Looking at, this is the first time that we know of that within a year's time we've inspected all wastewater treatment facilities, and a large amount of MPDS stormwater discharge MSGP permits. That was on top of our normal levels of service. So we added 2,000 inspections across the state. We had 500 in Central District that we added, and staff, I just want to thank them and kudos to them. They worked extremely hard from July to December knocking those out. So every wastewater facility has been looked at. So the work doesn't stop there. Those compliance inspections were done, as you can imagine, from large community systems down to small package plants. We did identify areas that need to be corrected and fixed, and so that's our next phase. We're working with all utilities and facilities to correct anything that needs to be corrected, take enforcement where we need to take enforcement, and it is a big lift, and staff have been doing a tremendous job, not just our district, but statewide. So, and I want to thank everyone for the support on that, because we had, as you can imagine, that big lift needed a little bit of extra resources, which we were able to utilize. So, job well done, but it doesn't stop there. That's all I got.
It's been a busy 6 months in Martin County. One of our priorities has been to be so highly active in LOSUM. We have representatives on the PDT and on all 6 sub-teams. So the county has postured itself to play a significant role and provide a significant amount of input through all the stages, so that we have documented some of our health concerns and our water quality concerns. So that will be ongoing, but it's been one of our board's top priorities is I think we have 14 between outside counsel and staff folks working on providing input in LOSUM. So we provided DEP comments on land application of biosolids, and the board's position was to urge them to more uniformly regulate all classes of biosolids, and to continue to move forward with technology-based solutions. I think, as Katie mentioned earlier, we're just finalizing our St. Lucie Estuary BMAP, and some of the comments were to take into account in that process some of the lake releases. And some great news is that our board last year embarked on a 10-year, 10,000 sewer to septic, or septic to sewer conversions. And within the first year, we've have 1,200 new sewer connections online. So we're just above pace with our 1,000 a year. So that's great progress. And Martin County did have a grant in today's package, so we're excited to continue to move forward with that. And just I thought this was a fun fact that our Public Works Department was doing. And they embarked on a street sweeping program, and they highlighted it last month for us. And they swept 760 miles of roadway, removing 278 pounds of debris from the roadways and keeping it obviously from the river. So in our board chambers, we had a 1 cubic foot box kind of to have a visual of what's being kept out of our storm and sewer system. So the total debris removed last year would have been equal to 7,000 of those cubes. And it says if staked, it would be 5.5 times higher than the Empire State Building. So I thought that was a really fun fact, and when Public Works put that out, I thought, this is really something to put out there. So, and then we continue, of course, to support our neighbors in St. Lucie County to get some of these projects done, C24 and 25, and that will certainly help you and all of Martin County. So
absolutely.
That's all I have for today.
All right. I just echoing some of the same things that we have going on in our community. We've been focused a lot on legislation right now. The legislative session is moving along quickly, and we do have some water quality bills that we're following and advocating for in our biosolids bill. So again, cautiously optimistic as anybody can be with the legislative session. And then locally, on a more local level, and I know Mayor Dodd from the city of Sebastian is here, there's been a countywide dialogue on pesticide usage and other alternative things. And so that's always a fun conversation, and it continues with new ideas coming to the table. So that's what we got going on in Indian River County. Jackie.
Jackie Thurlow Lippish. It's really wonderful to be on the board with everyone up here. And those of you I know from many years, like over a decade ago, and some would be new, I hope to get to know you better. It is my goal to come to all meetings this year. I was unable to achieve that last year, as it was my first year on the South Florida Water Management District with a completely new board, and it was overwhelming and wonderful, but now I'm totally floating, and I really look forward to getting more involved with this organization, of which of course I've been aware of for many years. I wanted quickly just to thank Patty Gorman, who will be retiring. You may have noted that. Patty is a wonderful person and had helped me, and I'm sure she helped many others over the years. And Dr. Serna Salazar will be taking over her position. And I also wanted to let you know that the district also hired a resiliency position, and her name is Dr. Carolina Moran, and I have her card here for anybody who might want to get in touch with her. She introduced herself at the meeting that the district held in the Port St. Lucie County Chambers just this past weekend. Yes, we held a meeting over the weekend, which was rather interesting. But we were so excited to be in St. Lucie County, and we are trying to be transparent and trying to get out, and we want that conversation because everybody has to speak on every single thing they want to talk about, and then we absolutely try to do the best for all, which is have clean water for our children and grandchildren. I also wanted to thank staff for this wonderful notebook that I received. It was probably the best notebook I have ever read of any of my government situations. It was just succinct, it was clean, it was well put together. Thank you very much for that. I'm very excited to be on the board. If you ever need me for anything, I'm here. And I'm sure Drew Bartlett would say the same. And we can't wait to work together. Thank you so much.
We are very happy to have you with us.
Great.
And
Thanks.
you shouldn't tell people how long we've known each other. You're
I
aging
know,
both of us.
I know.
It's only been
unbelievable.
months.
I know, just a few months.
Weeks.
Right. And thank you to Libby Pigman, who was here on my behalf. She's a wonderful resource. Absolutely. But yes, we have to we can't get together. Darn.
Just as long as you
Carolyn's
don't talk
gonna-
about any
That's right. That's right.
decisions.
Yeah, we've come a long way, baby.
Doug?
Yeah, two quick things. Well, one is I want to reiterate what Dwayne said about the governor. It's nice to get a governor that cares that much about the lagoon, about the water issues in the state, and he's been with us in spades, and I've seen it in my district. I've seen it in Jackie's district. It's great, and to give you the assets to get the job done. So I just wanted to say kudos to the governor. He's doing marvelous work and working hand in hand with the St. John's and with South Florida and with everybody involved, and I just love to see that kind of investment in our future. Secondly, and this is a little bit of pie in the sky, but a firm from the other side of the world read about what's happening with our algae issues, and they saw my name in the news article about 2 months ago and called me they traveled to my office in Fort Pierce at the USDA lab, and they have some technology they're working on that cleans up large amounts of water. They're working with Dubai on some of their marinas. Some of the countries in the Middle East are having problems like we do, and they have got technology that can clean up large amounts of water. They're coming back again to meet with me a second time because I said they needed to ramp up, because I said, be thinking big, like a 6,000-acre Calkins water farm or a water management district area of 5,000 to 10,000 acres. And they said, yeah, we think we can do that. And as a matter of fact, they're meeting with Detroit because of its impact on Lake Michigan. And they're meeting with people out in Lake Okeechobee. They think their technology can be ramped up to impact the water in Lake Okeechobee. So I want to meet with them again. I know it's just a dream when my brain started to go in all sorts of directions, hearing that they feel they can do this with their technology. They're going to come and meet with me again in about 2 weeks, and then if I see that it has truly got traction, I'm going to take them right to this man right here, just as soon as we can, and then on to Jackie's staff and Ann Shortell's staff as soon as we can to start doing big things, because if it works, I can't wait to bring him here.
Great.
So.
Wonderful.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yes, Billy Wheeler, Volusia County Council. I hope that's not, I just heard somebody on the news from my county who's running for an office say that we can just put we could just make this great big sock. That's all we have to do.
It's not a sock. We tried that.
Okay. Just
tried that.
Had to throw out that humor. And I wanted to thank Kayleen for all of her information. And I knew you were going to be spectacular because your last name is Wheeler and my name is Wheeler. So there we go. Power to the women. I just wanted to announce that tomorrow in Edgewater, Florida, in Volusia County, they're having Deb Denny's is actually putting it on, a water quality update, and it'll be talking about local projects, regional assurance plan, and resiliency. We have Edgewater, Volusia County, New Smyrna Beach, Oak Hill, DEP, and the St. Johns River Water Management will be there, as well as our guest, Dr. Julia Schwartz. So it's going to be a good event. Registration at 8:30, and the event starts at 9 in Edgewater City Hall.
That's great. Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I would just like to give you guys a little update. As most of you know, in 2016, the residents of Brevard County passed a 0.5% sales tax to be used for lagoon restoration. So it was anticipated at that time that would raise about $30 million a year. So we projected over the 10-year period we'd have about $300 million to work with. Well, we underestimated. This past year, we raised over $43 million.
Wow.
And so we're bumping up our estimates to excess of $450 million for the 10 years.
Nice.
So we've got lots and lots of projects planned. We have lots and lots of septic to sewer, stormwater, and septic to sewer conversion projects underway. So lots of stuff going on. It's good stuff.
That's awesome. Great news.
Power to the people.
Yeah.
There you go.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I totally apologize, but all the thank yous I made, the one I forgot was South Florida Water Management District. The extra scrutiny that went into some of the projects that were brought through was very important, and I want to thank the board for the effort, and your scientists and everybody who was a part of that. Without South Florida Water Management District taking a closer look at what we had in front of us, I don't know if we'd have been so successful. So I just want to absolutely
Thank you
point out
so
and say
much,
thank you.
and we're all very fond of you
And thank you for coming to St. Lucie
in the county.
Thanks.
Definitely.
Wonderful. All right, our next meeting is going to be Friday, May 8th, be here, or square at 9:30 in the morning. And if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we stand adjourned.
Good.